Welcome back, grade 11s. This is our third part of our lesson on completing the square. Up to this point, we multiplied out something that was in vertex form so that we could get a feel for that process. Then we reverse engineered that to try to take what we got in standard form and work our way back to vertex form. And so in this part, what we're going to do is write out some steps to help us remember and figure out how to do this process. You can write those steps on your solution here, or I'm actually going to write mine on a separate piece of paper that I can then look at anytime I'm doing a question. So that's what I'm going to do. I would maybe recommend that you do the same. So when we were doing this, the very first thing we did was we grouped together all the terms that had an x, and we factored out the number in front of the x squared. So I'm going to make a title here that says completing the square. So it just says completing the square. And our first step is to group together the terms that have an x. So group together terms with x's. Right? And then we factored out the number in front of x squared. We'll call that number 2. So factor out the number in front of x squared. Okay, that's how we started. We grouped together everything that had an x, and then we factored out what was in front of the x squared, right? And that last number had to just patiently wait a very long time for it to actually get its turn to be used. All right, from there, this is the weird part. We had to find a number that completed our trinomial, right? Something that we could factor. So we did that over here by trying to find two numbers that added to 6x, which was our middle term. And in order for this to work out and be a perfect square, they had to be the same two numbers. So I knew that it had to be 3 and 3 because 3 plus 3 makes 6, and they're the exact same number. A little shortcut for that is to just take your number and divide by 2. And then once we found those two numbers, we multiplied them together to get that top number here, which told me what our missing number was for the bracket. Okay, so how are we going to write that out? So this is step 3. We are going to find two numbers that are the same that add to the middle term. So find two numbers that are the same that add to the middle term. Right, so you can't see that. I said find two numbers that are the same that add to the middle term. Okay. And then we took those numbers and we multiplied them together. So we're going to multiply them together to get our missing number. Okay, so that's number 4. I'm going to say multiply them together. Multiply those numbers. Multiply those numbers to get the missing number. Okay, so I'm just going to read through one more time. So we've grouped together terms with x's, factor out the number in front of x squared, find two numbers that are the same that add to the middle term, and then we're going to multiply those numbers to get our missing number. So to get the missing number. Okay, so we did that. We found two numbers that are the same that add to 6x, right? And then we multiply them together. So we got 9x squared to get our missing number. So what do we do with that missing number? We add it and subtract it in the bracket. So that's step 5. There's a lot of steps here. So add and subtract the missing number. In the bracket. Okay, so we're going to add and subtract the missing number in the bracket. All right, so that was a whole lot of steps just to explain how we came up with this. So from here, what did we do? We had the -9 inside the bracket, but we didn't want it there. So we took whatever was in front and we multiplied to remove it from the bracket. So I might just say multiply the negative out of the bracket. So that's going to be 6 multiply the negative out of the bracket. So multiply the negative out of the bracket. Okay. Then what did we do? So I multiplied 2 by -9. We got -18. And then we collected up the like terms that were outside of the bracket. I'm out of space on this side, so I'm going to write the rest on the back. So step 7 is to, let's say, simplify the numbers outside the bracket. So simplify the numbers outside of the bracket. So simplify the numbers outside of the bracket. That got me to here. And then our last part, we needed to take x squared plus 6x plus 9 and factor it. So last step 8 is to factor the bracket. And that work I did there, I'll put that back in a second. We factored it off to the side, and then we just wrote our final answer in there. Okay, so one last time, we're just going to read through. So for completing the square, we grouped together the terms that had x's, and we factored out the number in front of x squared. So in this case, I factored out 2. And then the weird part, I took our middle term 6x. So it said find 2 numbers that are the same that add to the middle term. So I needed to find 2 numbers that were the same that added to 6x. That was 3x and 3x. So a little shortcut for that is you can divide by 2. So maybe I'll make a little side note there. We'll divide by 2 to help me out remember that. And then we are going to multiply those numbers to get the missing number. So I multiplied 3 times 3 to get 9. And then we add and subtract the missing number in the bracket. So we did that. We added 9 and subtracted 9. Then we multiplied the negative out of the bracket. So I didn't want the -9 in the bracket. It's there to show that we're multiplying by 2. So I did 2 times -9, right, to get that out of the bracket. So that doesn't need to be there anymore. And then simplify the numbers outside of the bracket. So I did 2 times -9 to get -18. I added 17 to get -1. And then our last step was to factor the bracket, which I did over here. And then we ended up with our final vertex form. Okay, next video, we're actually going to try to follow those steps and do another question on our own.